amazing Australians and the story of their lives. You're tuned to Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald.
Hello and welcome, listeners. After our last chat with Sallyanne Atkinson, we've had many requests to have her back to chat again. So this time we're going to chat in more depth about some of the things we discussed briefly last time. And we're just going to have a nice chat between ourselves. Welcome, Sallyanne.
Thank you, Rosemary. It's great to be here.
Now, I know that you've had many television interviews and many radio interviews over the years during your incredible career, but tell me about the very, very first TV gig that you did, which was going back quite a while ago, and it was called Beauty and the Beast.
Well, I'm glad you refrained from making the tired old joke of who was the beauty and who was the beast. And it was a long time ago because I was very young. I was in my early 20s. I was constantly pregnant. I had 3 children under 2 1/4, and I had 2 of them whilst I was on Beauty and the Beast, not actually on the programme, but almost one of them.
Oh, that's good to know.
And yes, but the other women on it were sort of old and older than me, and very glamorous. And I was sort of the little girl from Brisbane. So,
I find that hard to imagine.
But
Yeah.
it was good fun, and people did send in real questions. Quite extraordinary that they would ask these sort of very important things of perfect strangers. And the idea was that we women would give our views on whatever. And then Eric Boehm, who was the beast of the day, would say, "Oh, that's rubbish. How could you say something like that?" So, it was good fun.
It was sort of like an agony aunt, was it, or something like that, or not? Yes.
It was an agony aunt, and not so much that they were asking for solutions for their problems, but they were raising issues of the day, shall we say, and then we gave our views on them, which were quite different sorts of views, and Eric would give his views, and and it was very interactive. We would chat with each other, but the thing that was most difficult was that it was back in the days of film, before videos and all this sort of thing, and the camera would keep breaking down. We were up at Channel 7 in Brisbane, and then we'd have to stop, and they'd have to fix it, and things were very tedious in those days. It took longer.
Yes, and a lot different to what it is now, isn't it, in today's television and.
Where they can quickly. People can. I'm involved with the Outback Film Festival in Winton, and one of the producers last year was saying, soon all movies will just be made on your mobile phones. We'll just be able to do it that quickly.
Well, it's extraordinary how good they are. My husband and I actually produce books on sailing and seafood and wine, and the last book we did, I took most of the photos on my iPhone.
And fantastic photos they are too, if I may say so. Your books, because actually I'm going to be a bit wicked today. I'm going to interview you. Well, at least I'm going to ask you some questions about yourself, because I think that all your listeners who listen to you every week would really like to know more about the person who is Rosemary, because, can I say, listeners, this is a very interesting woman and very dear friend that we've become good friends that I'm sitting beside now. You might gather for a start that her voice is a bit un-Australian because, of course, you weren't born in Australia. Came out, you might tell us where you came from. And her autobiography has the wonderful title, Can My Pony Come Too? So perhaps you could tell us a little bit about that and then go on and tell us a little bit. I'll keep asking you questions, don't you worry, as Sir Joe used to say. I'll keep asking you questions about, your sailing around the world, settling at the Gold Coast, being a real estate auctioneer. So many interesting and different life experiences.
Oh, gosh, I feel as though I've been hijacked a little bit
you
here.
have to. Yes.
But no, Sallyanne's quite right. I am not Australian, although I am Australian, I should say, very much Australian. But I was actually born in Ireland, in Tipperary, and we came out as a family to Australia in 1954, dare I say, which is a long, long time ago. And we came from a lovely, beautiful home on Loch Derg in Tipperary in Ireland, and a lovely Georgian home. And we ended up living in the funniest little fibro building in the middle of the country in the little place called Reedsdale outside Braidwood, where my mother ran the local post office. And us children, because I was only 7 at the time, thought it was the most wonderful adventure, but my poor mother must have thought it was the worst thing on earth, I think. But we all survived, and yes, it was a really different way of life totally to what it was in Ireland. But I'm so glad.
Yes, I'm sorry I'm interrupting you because I had a sort of a similar sort of background, and for our mothers, for our parents, that being transplanted from one country, one culture, one way of life to another. It was an enormous shock, and it certainly makes us think about people coming here as migrants, particularly from cultures that are very different. People coming from the Middle East, people coming from, parts
Yes.
of the world where they didn't speak English when they got here. At least you could speak English, even if it was with an Irish accent.
Exactly. No, I wished I had an Irish accent. It was even worse because we had more sort of English accents, and we were ribbed a bit at school. Well, I wasn't quite so much, but Eugene, my brother, who very kindly introduced me to Sallyanne a number of years ago, and I'm forever grateful for, he was, of course, at an all-boys Christian Brothers school, and I must admit, I'm sure Eugene wouldn't mind me saying so, he actually had to develop two accents, one for outside the house and one for inside the house, because if he spoke with our accent. And people say, well, why haven't you got an Irish accent? Well, the reason I haven't got an Irish accent is because back in the 1920s, when my parents were going to school, they were actually all sent to England to school. And although the Irish at that particular stage weren't particularly fond of the English, they were sort of sent off to school to speak like the English do. So I've ended up now with an accent, as somebody said to me, it's sort of international, a bit of everything thrown in.
Yeah. Well, my father came from Belfast, the other side of Ireland.
Oh, that's
from
right.
yours,
Yes.
So, and he always regarded himself as being Irish, but being British as well. And when I came out here to school at the age of 11 or 12, I can't remember, apparently I used to say, I say, and of course, it gets beaten out of you very quickly. And I think it's interesting now when kids, there's a lot of talk in schools about bullying and people being picked upon for reasons. But I remember that, and you do too, but we just adjusted. I thought, okay, well, I'm different from them because I'm speaking differently, so I'll learn to speak like everybody else, and then I won't be bullied anymore. Now, I'm going to take you right along too, because there's so much to talk about and not enough time, of course. Serials. But when you married somebody in the army, an army officer, and then you went off to New Guinea, and he went to Vietnam, or perhaps in different order, and then you've sailed around the world. Rosemary and Rob have written the most amazing books about the Greek islands and Mediterranean and the Netherlands.
Look, I must admit I'm very lucky. I met Rob, talking of Eugene, my brother. He and Rob were at the same class at Duntroon Military College, and you might remember when I was speaking to Peter Cosgrove, or General Sir Peter Cosgrove, I should say, not long ago, we discussed the fact that they were all at the military college together, although Peter was in a couple of classes below. But yes, Sallyanne's quite right, because when we left, or when Rob graduated from Duntroon, he was posted to Papua New Guinea. And although we were engaged at the time, he always tells the story that I chased him up there and cornered him, and 60 years later, he is still on a leash, but not quite. But no, I was very, very lucky. And yes, New Guinea was an extraordinary time at that stage. I'm talking 1966, which Rob was with the Pacific Islands Regiment, 1 PIR in Port Moresby, and that's where we got married at Tarama Barracks. And then we spent 2 years there, and I worked for an airline company actually called Stoll Airlines, which was short takeoff and landing, which was a wonderful experience. And then Rob was posted to Vietnam, and I had my daughter Charlotte just 2 months before he went to Vietnam. And of course, he didn't see her again then until she was about 14 years old. 14 months old, I should say.
Gosh, yes.
14 months old. And then after that, we had a posting to Kapuka and Wagga, but then we were sent back to New Guinea again. And I must admit, I was delighted that that happened. And our youngest daughter, Georgie, or Georgina, was born in the Wewak Hospital back up there in the early 70s, which was quite an experience.
And it's such a different way of life for army wives. I mean, people talk about soldiers going off to war, or sailors going off to war, but it's the wives and the families at home that really put up with a lot that doesn't really get properly recognised, I don't think.
Well, certainly in those days, I must admit, we were more or less told as wives that the army came first and family second, and that's the way it was. But New Guinea, really, look, I have written a book. I've actually written a novel called Bird of Paradise that was set there. It really was an extraordinary place to live at that particular time. And it's something very, very close to my heart. Rob would go off on patrols for weeks and weeks and weeks at a time. And he would go to areas, Sallyanne, where no other white people had been. In actual fact, he's writing a book now and using some of the photographs that he used during that time. And it was extraordinary. He'd go off with his soldiers and they would explore places, as I say, that certainly no other white person, I should say, had been before. And or if they hadn't, we certainly didn't know about it. And it was an extraordinary time. And the comradeship between the wives and whatever back in the barracks and the other officers, it was terrific. It was a really lovely time to think back on. But having said that, can I just say that one only ever remembers in the distance, doesn't it? The good times. There were a few times that weren't quite so good.
And that's probably something to do with you and the kind of person you are, because lots of people do remember the very bad times all the time, and they sort of wallow in the bad times. And obviously all these life experiences you've had have made you, as with everybody, made you the person you are and given you a certain degree of resilience, which you have had to use a lot in recent times. I was going to ask you why you came to do the program and what was sort of the situation that you have found yourself in recent years.
Well,
months, really, not years, isn't it?
Really months, yes.
Yeah.
Back in February this year, I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And I did want to talk about that because at the time, I must admit, I thought, well, that's it. That's the end of it. My life is over. And the poor doctor that came to tell me, I can remember, had virtually had tears in his eyes. And certainly in the old days, ovarian cancer was always regarded as the silent killer. And when you were told you had it, you just thought, well, that's it, you're gone. Well, I thought I was gone. And poor Rob, when he came in to be told the same thing, immediately thought the same, and so did my daughters. But the treatment now, these days, is so much better than what it used to be. And I was literally, I have to say, very, very lucky because I went to hospital with symptoms that I must admit I thought was irritable bowel, which I suffered for years, and of course was told the other news. But I was diagnosed, honestly, Sallyanne, within an hour, a couple of hours down at the Gold Coast private hospital. And the care there has been absolutely terrific. But although my immediate worry was, am I going to pass this on to my two beautiful daughters and my beautiful granddaughter, I was able to have the test which told me that is not the case, that it's not hereditary. Nobody has any idea what causes it. Like many cancers, you have absolutely no idea. But here I am. I've had 9 rounds of chemotherapy. I had a very, very large operation, and then I had another 9 rounds of chemotherapy. And I'd like to share with you that the excitement that I am now in remission, and I still got to go and have tests every few months. But when I was initially told, going back to Sallyanne's question, I thought, well, I can't just sit here and wallow and think I'm going to die or whatever. I need to do something. And I've always volunteered with reading radios in Australia, first of all in Hobart, about 20 years ago, and then when we were living in Canberra with 1 RPH, and I read the newspapers up here in 4 RPH. But that's a little bit early in the morning because I live on the Gold Coast, so it was getting up very early. So
and it's also a terrible drive up from the Gold Coast.
It is, although I do catch the train.
Yes.
So I put my mind to what else, and so the management here and Chris and Sam before him, we discussed having a chat show, and this is how this eventuated. And Sallyanne was great encouragement to me, and was my first person who allowed me to interview her.
Well, I think it's fantastic because, I mean, this sounds corny and cliche, but you are an inspiration. You're an inspiration to me. You look fantastic. You've always had this sort of very positive attitude, apart from your initial falling about, oh, my God, I'm going to die. Yeah. But once you got over that thought, yes. And actually that must be quite useful in a sense, because I've spoken to people, say, who were in the war particularly, who almost did die, and then to be given a second chance, to be able to get over that, must change your attitude to life. At least that's been my observation from talking to people. It changes the way you think about things, the things that you know are important, and you don't waste time on the things that are not important.
Exactly. And I think if I learned anything, or I am still learning anything, is to live each day as it comes. Because if you look at the whole big picture, sometimes it becomes absolutely overpowering. And, if you dwell on what could happen in the future or whatever, you've got to, which I do, I find, is just sort of wake up each day and look out the window, and whether it's sunny or whether it's overcast or whatever, I think, wow, oh, well, here's another day. We'll get on with living it. And as I say, these chat shows have been just, for me, have been absolutely wonderful, because not only do I meet the most terrific people to interview, I meet all the wonderful staff, including Paul and Chris and Richo and Andrew here and Joe, who are the most terrific people here at the radio station and have been so encouraging. So it's been wonderful for me to think, and it's a lovely outing. I hop on the train and I come up and have a lovely day.
And good on you. We want more people on trains and in buses and public transport to get them off the roads. It's so important that they do that.
You're listening to Lots to Chat About. I'm Rosemary Peterswald, and my guest today is Sallyanne Atkinson.
I want to come back to the ovarian cancer just for a minute, because they do call it the silent cancer.
Yeah.
Do you encourage people to get diagnosis or testing? I mean, how do you know you had a particular tummy problem?
Yes.
And so you were to be investigated for that, and that's when they found the cancer. But
Yes.
how do people?
Well, that, Sallyanne, is one of the hardest things. And I have a terrific surgeon down on the Gold Coast, which I'm sure she wouldn't mind me mentioning, Helen Green. And I have a wonderful oncologist, Andrea Tasakova. And I've spoken to them both about it. And it is a very, very hard thing to diagnose. I immediately, of course, when I discovered I had it, I sent it off, made sure my daughters went off to be tested and have an ultrasound. But even then, I'm not 100% sure that can pick it up. But I think the only thing you can do is if you notice something different or whatever. In my case, I must say that the thing that really drew it to my attention, apart from the pain, was that my stomach did start to swell a bit, and I gather that is one of the very first. Well, actually, not the first things, because that means it's gone on a little bit. But yes, it's a matter of just knowing your own body and knowing when to go and see the doctor.
And being very aware. And you did say earlier, Rosemary, about the advances in medical science, how fantastic that is. I mean, every day new things are being discovered. We were going to talk, listeners, today about the Queensland Brain Institute, which I'm involved in,
Yes.
and the amazing work that they're doing in dementia and motor neurone disease and all those things. But I really was keen to talk to Rosemary and let you, dear listeners, know her a bit better, because I think it's really important. She's coming into your living rooms or your bedrooms or wherever it is that you're listening to this, and she's a real person and a fantastic person. So I think you want to share my friendship with her too.
Oh, that's
Now she's all
something.
embarrassed. Sorry.
No. But no, well, here I am, and I feel terrific, and it's a matter of going and having blood tests every 3 months and whatever. But you can't live by that. And I did read actually something that I can also say, which is wonderful, is to read success stories. And somebody, Eugene actually sent me a book that was written by an American author, and unfortunately I can't remember the name. But she was actually a cancer specialist herself, and was then diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And she survived, and she's still alive 15 years later. And reading her story and what she went through and the despair, but then the uplifting times and whatever, was a wonderful inspiration. But the only thing I haven't been able to do as much as I would like over the last 8 or 9 months is go sailing, because, as Sallyanne says, that has been part of Rob and my life for close to 60 years, 58 years now, from the very first little putt-putt boat we got in Papua New Guinea to the number of yachts we've got, and have actually sailed the world. I won't say we've sailed around the world, but we have sailed the world.
There can be very few oceans that you haven't sort of traversed at some time.
Yes, look, it's been a wonderful adventure to have together. We spent 35 years in Tasmania, where we had our own business and
Real estate.
business. Well, we started in Tasmania. We were one of the incredibly stupid people, I think, that ever went to Tasmania and bought an apple orchard. I think they were we were the last people to ever buy an apple orchard, but that's how we started there. And I continued my real estate career. And then I was an auctioneer.
And you're a pioneer auctioneer, weren't you?
I was the first woman auctioneer in Tasmania, and one of very, very few in Australia at the time, back in the 80s. Then Rob and I went on to start our own business in Tasmania, which is called Peterswald's, and it's still, I'd like to say, it is still running there under the name Peterswald's, and our daughter Charlotte has her own business in Sydney called Charlotte Peterswald for Sydney. But it's been it was a terrific thing for us to do, because eventually we employed a number of staff, although we did start the business ourselves from the spare bedroom, actually, just at home. But once we got a number of staff and whatever, we were able to continue our sailing, and we had 3 or 4 boats in Tasmania. And then eventually we've sailed across the whole east coast of Australia, and then we went to the Mediterranean, as you say, and we bought a Beneteau 50 over there, and we spent 8 or 9 summers there, sailing the Mediterranean and producing our books on sailing, seafood and wine.
And the books that you've produced, you've also self-published, which is a fairly risky and adventurous thing to do. And they're beautiful books. I've loved the Netherlands one that you've just done. Is there another sailing adventure in you?
Well, we like to think so.
I think so.
Rob still continues to look at the boats for sale. I mean, we've got a beautiful boat here, and we're very lucky down on the Gold Coast. We live at Runaway Bay, and we have our boat down in a marina berth just below our deck. So we do sail, and we're planning to do more sailing on the east coast of Australia. Whether we'll go overseas or not, the last... as Sallyanne says, the last book we produced was Beautiful Waterways, which was sailing the Netherlands, exploring all the canals and the beautiful food and wine and whatever in the Netherlands. I don't know that we will produce another book overseas. That it's changed. I mean, sailing's changed. Turkey's changed. We spent a lot of time in Turkey, but Turkey has changed as sailing waters, and it's not quite as easy as it used to be.
Well, I think with everything that goes on in the world,
yes.
The world has changed. I mean, that's a cliche, if ever there was one. But, where is a safe place to go? We don't know. All that, everything's... But, of course, we see it all on television too, which brings it close. But something I wanted to touch on, and I meant to, but I didn't want to interrupt you, is healthy lifestyle.
Yes.
When we're talking about cancer, and you talked about early diagnosis, I would have thought that one of the important things is living a healthy lifestyle. Eating properly, exercising, being social, talking to people, being interested in what's going on around you.
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And one of the hardest things, I think, when you are diagnosed with cancer is thinking, why? Why? Well, not why me, because I mean, quite frankly, I'm getting on a bit. Because there are so many younger people that are now diagnosed, and that came home to me very much so when I was in the oncology receiving chemotherapy, that there are so many young people that came in as well. Lifestyle, look, nobody knows. I have lay there, I can tell you, thinking, gosh, I did smoke, I must admit, back in the early days, and I did smoke, and I've certainly enjoyed a glass of wine, although I haven't had one now since February, which is... unusual for me, but I'm too frightened to have one. But I like to think I've always exercised. I've always been very positive, and yes, I don't know. Nobody knows. I dare say that if everybody or anybody knew what caused cancer, we wouldn't have it, would we?
No, well, that's the thing, and that's why we have to encourage our researchers in all parts,
yes.
All areas, all fields, that to hope that discoveries are going to be made not only in the treatment of diseases like cancer and dementia and motor neurone disease, but also in the prevention and the diagnosis.
Exactly, Sallyanne, and which brings me back to you being on the board of the Brain Institute here in Queensland, because dementia and Alzheimer's and whatever there is another thing that nobody knows what causes it, do they?
And very sadly, at the moment, there's no treatment. That's something that the Brain Institute is working on, and other researchers in the country, but there's no absolute fast and dry treatment at the moment for it. And the numbers, of course, are huge. But one of the reasons the numbers are huge is because we're all living so much longer.
Yes.
So once upon a time, people, died respectably at the age of 70. Now here we are. A little bit over, aren't we, you and I? We're still here.
A little wee bit. Yeah.
And we're still here.
Yes.
So, the statistics would say, well, yes, it's more likely to people to get it. But there's a whole lot of things that have been solved since my childhood. I mean, one of the things I remember that my spina bifida used to be a thing. Now, I don't know any young, no babies now seem to be born with spina bifida. I haven't properly sort of followed that through, but that, if anybody among our listeners might know, they might tell me. But, there were a lot of diseases that were around once upon a time.
Well, we were only talking about polio, of course. Yesterday I was talking with somebody about
big thing
that.
in our childhood.
And, absolutely. I mean, we were all lined up back in 1955, I think it was, and given the huge, well, it seemed huge at the time, polio injection. But sadly, before that, there was no immunisation, and there was a tremendous amount.
And there were children of our generation in iron lungs and steel calipers, and so we have to be very optimistic and full of heart at the work that is going on in various places.
Exactly, and I mean, my mother lived to 98, which gives me great heart.
Oh, you've got wwonderful genes.
I have. Well, I wasn't so sure a little while ago, but I'm hoping I have now. But her brain was terrific, and she remembered more than me. In fact, when I wrote my book, Can My Pony Come Too? My mother was a wonderful help, and I'd sit there and read things to her, and she'd say, no, that's not how it happened, or whatever. But having said that, Mummy would be the first to admit that she didn't probably lead the healthiest lifestyle. She smoked and she enjoyed a sherry and whatever there, but there she was at 98.
But it is funny that I've just remembering how often we have read or heard people who've reached 100 and they say, what is the key to your long life? And they say a beer a day or a couple of beers a day. So, yes, having said that a healthy lifestyle is a good idea, and I'm sure it is, who knows? Enjoy yourself, I think, is the answer. Be positive.
I think that is.
And be kind to other people.
Exactly. But I think Sallyanne is so right. I think a positive attitude and getting out there and doing things, which, of course, Sallyanne Atkinson is so famous for, having got out there and done so many things. But Sallyanne, look, I know you've hijacked me and whatever, but I've loved talking.
No apologies for that either, everybody.
And I hope we can have lots more chats in the future. So.
Yes, because there's so much to chat about.
There certainly is. But thank you, listeners, and thank you, Sallyanne.
Thank you.
And thank you, Paul.
Great friends and great chats. That was another Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald. Stay tuned next week for another amazing chat.